Today on Locked On Canadiens, what happens if the Habs do fire Marty?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1190, which is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Laura Saab, also known as The Active Stick, and I'm joined by the wonderful Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian. Ian, we had such high hopes for the Canadiens not falling flat on their faces in that Vegas game. We weren't expecting a win, but we were expecting something. And I think we got more of the same old we were worried about. How's your weekend been?
Well, after Saturday, it got, remarkably better because the Canadiens did not lose on Sunday by the way that they lost on Saturday because they didn't play. So, the things are looking up. We didn't have to watch another effort like we did against Vegas.
We're at the stage in the Canadian season where we're relieved that there are no games going on.
Which lasted for the whole week. We were like, man, there's nothing to talk about. There's no games. I wish they were playing. And they came back for one game and we're like, go away forever. I don't want to talk to you until April. We're good. We're good, actually.
Let's go back to no games. All right, so this episode, obviously, we have to talk about that game. That'll be our first segment. In our second segment, we'll do a weekly recap overall. There were only 2 games, but I do think that there were a couple of highlights to point out. And then finally, in our last segment, this is what I really want to talk about, is that people keep talking about how, the Canadiens need to fire Marty, get a new coach, fire Marty. All right, well, we want to talk about what happens if they do that. Like, what happens if they do fire Marty and get a new coach? And that's going to be in our last segment today. But first, we have no choice. We have to talk about the game. This is the second time that I have to talk about the game because I was on Game Over last night. And I have to say, I do not relish the thought of having to talk about this team or that particular game 2 days in a row.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's cruel and unusual punishment for you. We should have given you the day off. But this, as Marty always says, the schedule doesn't stop. So we have to sit here.
We don't stop either.
And stew in it for a minute. First period was good. They didn't give Vegas much, didn't get much of their own, to be quite honest. But that's sort of how you expect a bottom-dwelling team like the Canadiens to be playing one of the NHL's premier franchises in Vegas. And then the second period started, and to use the euphemism that Marty has used in the past, they threw up all over themselves. They did the thing that we kind of all dread they do, which is give up goals in bunches and let the game get out of hand within the matter of seconds. What are your feelings about watching that again? Like, I know it's bad, right? We know it's bad. It feels bad. Did this time feel any different coming off of what was actually a really great effort against Edmonton?
Yes, it did, because I expected better after that effort against Edmonton. And it wasn't just an effort against Edmonton, right? The previous week went okay as well. I know it was only 2 wins, not 3 wins out of a 3-game week, but the Canadiens they showed us a lot in those games, even the one where they were shut out. So for them to revert back to the same old habits and the same old despair, that killer instinct just disappeared, that compete level, which is like, I hate words like that, compete level. What does that even mean? But you know exactly what I'm talking about right here. That disappeared, right? Like, they did the same thing they always do, which is unravel at the slightest sign of adversity and then never be able to get it back together. That was the thing, is that they showed zero resilience. There were 5 unanswered goals. They reverted back to their bad habits. There were points in the game where you felt like they were never going to get back into the offensive zone. And that, to me, it was annoying, because we've seen it before and we've seen them in the past be able to avoid this pitfall. I don't understand why it's still not something that they can consistently avoid.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the word that Nick Suzuki used earlier on in the season, and that's immature. This is an immature team. That was an immature effort. They broke a streak, or a trend last week against Buffalo, in that they finally won a game where they trailed. That was the first time they had won a game in which they had trailed at any point. They still have not won a game where their opponent has scored first. They were 0-8-2 going into that game against Vegas. They left it 0-9-2. They've played 20 games. 11 of the time they do not score. 11 of the times they did not score first. That's over 50%. So if that doesn't change, it means that as soon as the first goal is scored, turn the game off. Because it does not matter what they do from that point on. They have not been able to overcome an early, not even an early lead. That lead came in the second period. It was not like they fired the first puck into the net. Montembeault was great in that first period, and they needed him to be great. He ends up getting pulled in the second period, which I don't know if the word mercy pulling makes a lot of sense, but I mean, just get him out of there because the team was not performing in front of him. It was unfair to Montembeault to leave him in there. And we were looking yet again at two young forwards who are sort of being scapegoated in all of this, and reasonably so. Juraj Slafkovsky and Kirby Dach had bad games, ended up on the fourth line. The two of them had turnovers that led directly to goals against with bad passing decisions. I kind of want to talk about Kirby Dach a little bit in our weekly recap, so I'll leave that for now. But the sight of them still getting first power play minutes in the late second period and early third period, but also being on the fourth line is very funny to me. And it's very Marty in that he would absolutely choose to do that given everything else that was happening. Where are we at on hitting the panic button on the way that these young players are performing so far?
It's only been 20 games. I think that's the big thing. A season is 82 games. That's for a reason. And when you are a rebuilding team, unfortunately, you have to look at the trends and not the individual games. And I think the trend right now is not that great, but it's not universal, right? The Canadiens have put together games where this has not happened. So I do have faith that over the course of the next, 20 games, we'll be able to see if it's time to hit the panic button or not. But I'm not panicking. I know a lot of people are. I know there's, people are asking for heads at this point. We are going to talk about that in our third segment. But for me, I'm not at that point yet. I'm not panicking. I'm not asking for heads. I'm not there yet. But I do think that this is an upsetting trend. I'm not going to say I'm worried because this team is so young. It's so young, and unfortunately, it doesn't have the talent to recover in a lot of these situations. So you put those two items together, what you're going to get is what we're seeing on the ice. It's not fun, but I'm not panicking yet. What about you? Are you panicking?
On the larger picture of how this team is built and where they're headed, no. There are certain things that I am starting to get a little concerned about. And we'll talk about them, I think, in the weekly recap in our second segment. But to your point, from a larger, bird's eye view, looking at how this team is being built, no, I'm not all that concerned about the way that this is headed. We don't know where they're headed because they're not there yet, right? They will get there when they get there. We were not anticipating them getting there this season because two of the three pieces that they tanked for aren't even here. David Reinbacher, even if he wasn't hurt, I don't think he'd be here right now. He'd be in Laval. Ivan Demidov is not here right now. He's over in Russia. So until all of the pieces get here and we start to see what it all looks like put together, I won't panic about the larger scope of these issues. With that said, there are some things that are starting to concern me. And it's how the smaller pieces fit into the larger puzzle. But again, to your point, it's 20 games. Things will get worked out over time. But there are still some things, and I'm teasing big time for the second segment here, but there are still things that are a little concerning to me.
All right, last words on that game. For me, it was just, forget it and move on.
Yeah. What else can you do? I will say we're talking about turnovers. That's what I like to do here. Vegas turned the puck over 19 times against the Montreal Canadiens. The only problem is the Montreal Canadiens turned it over 20 times. So like they cannot get out of their own way. Like that was not Vegas's best game. They did not play all that well. Montreal just put goals on their stick. Yeah. So it's not only how many of these turnovers, but where they happen. Dach's happening, a backhand no-look pass right into the slot in his own zone. Like, come on, man. You cannot make a pass like that. Slavkovsky making one at the opposing blue line, just across the blue line, they get picked off and go back the other way. Like, there's turnovers and there's capital T turnovers, and those were the latter.
And we are going to talk a little bit more about the trends of this week, even though there were only 2 games. I think there's a lot to talk about. We're going to have our weekly recap up next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You hear us talk about FanDuel a lot because it is America's #1 sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, it's time to do the weekly recap. Can we just not talk about the Vegas game and only focus on the Edmonton game? Can we do that?
I am going to disappoint you and say that we do have to talk about the Vegas game in some
Damn it.
capacity because it was part of the week.
Yes.
We started off the week with our weekly forecast where we sort of said, what did we set the benchmark at? If they got a point, we'd be thrilled.
Yeah.
They got 2 and we leave still upset. That's just sort of the part of being a fan of this team, is almost never being happy with the results on a day-to-day basis. But that Edmonton game was fantastic. That Edmonton game at the time, I said, that's the standard now. That's the game that you need to hold yourselves to.
And they do need to do that because they proved themselves able to.
Right. It's no longer an excuse. We saw what you can do. You have to be able to do that. I'm not saying every night, but more nights than not. That needs to be the effort that we see. Not so much effort in that they're not trying, but effort as in a noun, a thing that we see in front of us. I just think that I also think the idea that these guys aren't trying is lazy. It's a lazy narrative. Stop. These guys are trying. They get paid handsomely to do what they do, but they are out there trying. I really dislike, and that's something that's pervasive not only through this fan base but the entire sport, is that when they lose, they're not even trying out there. Well, okay, I guess you can see effort. That's crazy. Good for you. You'd be the only person on earth who can see that. But it just felt like the Edmonton game, they got their assignment and they crushed it. They all did exactly what they needed to do that game. Every part worked the way it was supposed to, and it led to a shutout win. It led to not only a shutout win, but 2 of the best players on the planet being held off the score sheet, only to go into Ottawa the next night and absolutely torch the Ottawa Senators. So, the fact that they were able to do that, it then highlighted by them going to, a contemporaries arena, tired, and beating that team out of the building. Highlighted to me,
fun.
Always great. It's super great watching guys that Montreal handled go into Ottawa and then still just beat the Ottawa Senators, who are also having a terrible, very no good, very bad week. Things are still looking up for us in the Atlantic there. I don't really know that I have much else to say about that Edmonton game. It's good to remember. I hope that they're able to sort of get back to the way that they felt going into that game. Have the same lunch, do the same routine beforehand, just make it feel like you're about to go play the Edmonton Oilers again, because this upcoming week we'll get to tomorrow. But it's that there's not the same level of competition coming into Montreal. There's some good teams, some good players, but it's not the Stanley Cup finalist Edmonton Oilers and the Stanley Cup, potential favorites in the Vegas Golden Knights, so there's better games ahead for Montreal.
I agree. So you did want to talk about Kirby Dach. We are going to get into a little bit of trouble if we keep harping on him. But there's some stuff going on there.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care if this conversation bothers you, because it's important. It's an important one to have. He is a crucial part of this rebuild working out. He is slotted in to play center behind Nick Suzuki. We've talked about this. He's not currently playing center.
He's not even playing on the second line.
He's not even playing on the second line. So the two things he's supposed to be, second line and center, he's doing neither of them right now. And I just I feel for the guy because obviously he's having a hard time putting it back together after his injury. Obviously. Yeah. However, when you said earlier it's 20 games, there's time. 20 games is a quarter of the season, right? Like the season's 82 games. We're 25% of the way through this thing. It gets late early in the NHL, and we're kind of getting there. Not only in the sense that, I don't think this team will get back into a playoff race. That's not really what I'm looking at here, but how much longer do we watch this and consider Kirby Dach part of the core of this team? Like I'm asking that because I don't know the answer. I'm at a point with him where I have a hard time seeing the player that we're watching now and seeing that he does anything that would keep him as part of the core of this team. He's on power play 1. Laura, what does he do on power play 1? Have you noticed?
He does a whole lot of ineffective play, I'm going to call it.
He holds space. He holds space in front of the net. And he's sort of, how David Savard loves to keep the puck against the boards in the defensive zone? Dach does that in the offensive zone for some reason, so that Slavkovsky can come in and help him win a battle.
Yeah.
Is that a guy that is Kirby Dach the only one who can be doing that right now? He's not
replace him with anybody on there.
You could put, I'm going to say something really mean. You could put Josh Anderson there and he can do those things. That's not good.
That's the two players.
Yes, of course it's mean to two players, but it's not good. So I have not hit the panic button on Kirby Dach yet, but if it's like the deal or no deal button where they have the big plastic case that I'm opening the case above the button. I have not hovered over it, but I'm ready to press it. I'm getting there. Am I off base with this player? I'm just getting very concerned that I don't know what this guy is.
I think the question is whether it's in his head or whether it's in his talent. If he's not fully recovered from the injury and he's trying to play through it, well, that's an in his head thing because he shouldn't be making decisions like that, right? He should be rehabbing. So I don't know, but I have a hard time believing that his talent just disappeared. I trust in this front office's ability to see potential. And I think Emil Heineman is such a good example of that because I question that. So I questioned that every day until Friday last week or Thursday night when we were recording the mailbag. But, I just, something's off. And the question is no longer what is wrong with him. The question is it fixable? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a perfect summation of where we are. The first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. I think that they all know that there's a problem here. Kirby Dach included. After the game, he was very colorful in his language. We can't repeat any of it on this show, so I won't. But you can go look it up. He, if you've seen the Amazon series on the NHL where Connor McDavid is yelling and screaming in the locker room, it was essentially that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's an issue here. I probably think that he's more than likely going to work his way out of it, but it's really tough to see how he's going to do that based on what we've seen so far. But I want to be done with that. Too negative. Stars of the week. Who or what do you think stood out for the Canadiens this week?
I honestly, I had a hard time because I thought Slav had a great game and then he had a bad game. Yeah. I really wanted it to be Slav.
Yeah. I think he's the difference between Slav and Dach at this point is Slav at least has his moments.
Yeah.
Right. He has his moments where he's whipping a puck across the ice to a teammate and it's landing right on his stick. We're not seeing those from Dach. We're getting those from Slav, which leads me to believe he can pull himself out of it with some more, good decision making. For me, the thing that I'm taking away from this week is I want power play 1 to play with the same urgency that power play 2 uses. Power play 2 skates out there like their hair is on fire.
Yeah.
And I like watching it. They're zipping the puck around. They've set up more bumper plays than power play 1 has. If they can set up that bumper play and get it to Cole Caulfield in the middle, I have a lot more confidence in that going in than whatever one they set up on power play 2 where God love Alex Newhook, but he's not burying it from there, but they're setting the play up.
Yeah.
Power play 2 for me is a bright spot because they are moving the puck with urgency, and power play 1 has not been doing that. So
Urgency and aggression.
absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like that's because power play 2, by nature of who's on that power play, all those players are hungrier because they want to earn a spot on that first power play. So, that to me, if they need to find a way to replicate that urgency on power play 1.
I agree with you. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that and some more decision making in our final segment, because we're going to talk about how not everyone, a certain segment of this fan base wants Marty fired. But nobody's thinking about what happens when Marty does get fired, if he does get fired. So we're going to talk about that in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this hockey season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. This week on PrizePicks, I'm looking at the hockey board and selecting Jack Hughes for more than 4 shots on goal, and Artemi Panarin for more than 1 assist, and John Tavares for more than 9 faceoffs won, and Brady Tkachuk for more than 5 hits. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. I'm going to say that again. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. All right. So we see daily in our comments at least one, usually multiple, comments talking about how Marty should be fired, or how Marty is a bad coach, or how Marty shouldn't be coaching this team, or Marty shouldn't be coaching any team, or Marty this, Marty that. Okay. But here's my question. If you remove this coach and put in any other coach and you keep the roster the same, how different are your results going to be?
I will harp on one point that I know I have been harping on for weeks, months, years at this point with Marty here, and I think I'm starting to see a lot of people come to the side that I stand on with Marty St. Louis. Call timeout. Marty, at 3-0, call timeout. The game's not technically over at that point, and you are still in this, and you have one thing at your disposal that can help your team. Call timeout. So maybe bringing in a new coach will help the Canadiens leave with fewer timeouts in their pocket at the end of the game, because you cannot take it with you. And he's saving them at that point to drop the perfect play at the end of the game, assuming that they get back in the game, and they never get back in the game, so it never matters. At this point, and the stat I read earlier about how Montreal cannot win if they give up the first goal, call timeout after the first goal. Reset these guys. Tell them new game starts now. Because now if you get the first goal of this game, you're back in the game. That is the one thing that I am certain would change under a different coach. And to bring it back to your question, nothing else would change. Not a thing would change on this team if there was a different coach behind the bench. And I'm tired of pretending that that's not the case, but you're expecting that a new coach would come in mid-season and completely revamp the way this team plays. You're out of your mind. I just don't think we don't live on the same planet. That's not something that will exist in reality. And they were never going to fire Marty to hire Jim Montgomery. I know he just got hired in St. Louis. Who else is out there? Gerard Gallant, who's been sitting on the sidelines for over a year now. Come on, the options aren't better out there, right? They can't be.
They're this is the thing. It's they can bring in another coach. It's not going to work because the roster that you have is playing the way it is. And this is the thing. It's I look at, let's take out the timeouts for a second. I look at the in-game decisions that Marty makes, and a lot of times it's the same decisions that any other coach would make, right? Like
Yes.
this is the thing. It's like putting these guys, benching someone, putting them down on the fourth line, moving Jake Evans up. Every single coach in the NHL is going to try that, right?
Yes.
And that's the thing. It's like I don't see that. Like you can't replace Marty unless you're going to bring in somebody who's magically going to age these players 2 years each,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, every coach has a Yoel Armia that gets put on the top line from time to time. Every coach has one. Go watch, go talk to any fan of any other team that's in a similar situation as the Montreal Canadiens right now, and you will find a bunch of teams who have a bunch of Yoel Armias who are playing in places they shouldn't be, right? Like
Right.
You're bang on about the fact that Marty is one of the hockey men in this league. They're
Yeah.
all the same dude.
They're all the same guy. It's not going to change. And every team has like a Uri Slafkovsky, like a young star who occasionally bears the brunt of his coach's anger by being stapled to the bench or being demoted, even though necessarily I might not agree with that decision at that point. I don't see it. Marty is not a terrible coach. Marty is just a coach. He's the same coach as every other team has, right? And you can't do anything unless your roster improves. And I would argue that he's doing good things with this team. Like you just talked earlier about how the team, it's not like the team isn't trying. Like Marty's a coach who demands 100% effort, and you're not going to get away with not doing that on this team, right? He will rip paint off the walls in the locker room. Like every single one of these players will run through a wall for him. They love him. He hasn't lost the room. It's just that they're not executing. They can't execute. There's like a problem there, and I would argue that it's not a Marty problem. I would argue that it is a front office problem. They got to figure that out.
I also think there's a bit of something that I noticed when the Canadiens were in the midst of their tank, and people were so certain that because they weren't getting number one picks, that the tank was going to fail and they weren't going to win a Stanley Cup. Not winning the Stanley Cup is the more statistically
Likely
realistic thing. Yes. Yes, exactly. So you're not like, people thought they were sticking their neck out to be like, this team will never win a Stanley Cup. Yeah, man. Every year, 31 teams don't. Like that's the same thing as with coaching. Like, how many coaches are there out there who will make a legitimate difference to their roster? Like, I look at last year, Paul Maurice. Before Paul Maurice won the Stanley Cup, he was just one of those hockey guys that was bouncing around from city to city, waiting to get a goalie. He finally got one in Winnipeg, and it still didn't do him any good in Winnipeg.
Because he didn't have a good team.
No, and now Winnipeg's great. Wow, look at that. It's funny how that happens. I think people overvalue coaching to an extent where it makes the discourse about talking about a hockey team insufferable, because they think like this coach will go in there and the players will never make a mistake ever again.
Yeah.
No, like there's no amount of coaching that Marty St. Louis could do during that game that would not have Kirby Dach put that puck right on the nightstick, or have Uri Slafkovsky cough the puck up at the blue line, right? Like that's decision making, that's execution from the players. And we've talked about the difference between these things for a while on this show. This show is not pro or anti Marty. I will give it to Marty when I see fit. And like the timeout thing is something that I've been on him about for years now. So like
it's a problem.
That's something, it's a problem. And I wish he would address it. Like he left that game with his timeout in his pocket. Like, come on. Yeah. There's no reason for that. So, but to get back to the point, like, I don't think that like this show will never be pro or anti Marty St. Louis. It's just a matter of how this team manages to become the team they want to be. And if Marty is helping them get there, which right now he is, then I'm cool with it. And the moment he does not become that, he is not that coach, is the time where you need to move on. But for the team that they have right now, and possibly the team that they'll have in the future, he's fine. Yeah. He's fine.
He's not the problem.
No, he's not the problem.
He is not the problem. There's a lot of problems with this team. I don't think that like having Marty as the coach is chief among them.
No. Nope. Not at all.
All right. Are we ready for trivia, Ian?
We are. Let's get back to the question that we asked you guys on Friday. We mentioned on Thursday, Pavel Datsyuk signed a one-day contract with Detroit to retire a Red Wing. His first goal against the Habs was on October 17th, 2002. Who was in net for the Montreal Canadiens? And Laura, you have the answer here.
Yes. We had a bunch of people guess Jose Theodore. was not Jose Theodore. I also guessed Jose Theodore. And then I remembered that Jeff Hackett was a thing. There was a Hackett era in Montreal, and Jeff Hackett is the answer.
Yes, Jeff Hackett, 5 years in Montreal, 161 games played. He went 63, 68, and 22 in that time. 8 shutouts, a 9-12, and a 253. He made 30 saves on 32 shots to win that game for Montreal 3-2. The 3 goals from the Canadiens came from Saku Koivu, Andrei Markov, and Andreas Dackel, who's another guy.
Wow.
Love to remember Andreas Dackel on the show.
Guy. But man, I got to tell you, Jeff Hackett, I would not have thought he spent that long in Montreal or played that many games.
No, definitely. Like the way that our goaltending hierarchy went from Waugh to now Montembeault, like Hackett did not figure into any of that in my mind either. So very cool to see that guy pop up. All right, today's question, name the guy. This actually was a suggestion from a listener. So name the guy: Washington, Colorado, Florida, Anaheim, Montreal, Chicago. Washington, Colorado, Florida, Anaheim, Montreal, Chicago. I'll give you another hint as well. He's a forward, and he started his career in 05-06 and ended it in 15-16. So 10 years in the NHL. Good luck. If you have the answer, put it in the comments. We will pin whoever gets it right on YouTube and shout you out on the next episode of the show.
And that's our trivia for today. That makes our episode. We want to thank everyone for listening. And we want to encourage everybody to please subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Tell all your friends, leave reviews, make sure people can find us. You can find us all over social media. We're at Locked On Canadiens on Blue Sky, on Instagram, on TikTok. You can email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. It's just Locked On Canadiens. You can find us all over social media. I'm at The Active Stick. Ian is at Maybe It's Ian. We want to thank everyone for listening, and we will see you all tomorrow.